Bitches call me Pack-a-Punch because they know I pack-a-punch, motherfucker. I be dack-and-dunch. Ooh! Hold on. Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back. I'm your host today, Gaming Legion. You can call me Legion, you can call me Jacob, whichever you prefer. Welcome back. Today, I want to talk about a little something. Recently, thanks to me not wanting to shut the fuck up about the Switch 2 on TikTok, I started a few wars within my comments sections. One specifically was me talking about the differences between the Steam Deck and the Switch 2. Or at least saying that I think that the Switch 2 will be better. Now, is one or the other better? We'll see that today. Can the Steam Deck emulate the Switch 2? Absolutely fucking not. Are there any other better alternatives? Probably. But that is what we will be looking at today, ladies and gentlemen. I have gone through about 2 hours of research earlier this morning while I was at work. So it was, 5:30, 6 a.m. when I was doing this. And I have gone through all of the most modern handheld consoles, mainly PC handheld, and then throwing it and comparing it to the Switch 2. Now, why are we comparing the Nintendo Switch 2, a mainly Nintendo console, to PC handhelds? Well, this is just because it's the handheld market right now. That's kind of what we're looking at. We're not looking at it from Nintendo console and like the console wars versus PC and stuff. We're looking at it from what's a better handheld. I will be mentioning stuff about games later, but that's going to be a minor point in this. But I want to mainly put into perspective how much the Switch 2 has modernized over its original iteration of the Nintendo Switch and even the Switch OLED in some cases. Now let's get this out of the way. Every PC handheld is way better than the Switch. I like that. That's not even like a question. That's not even an argument anymore. But the Steam Deck, ROG Ally, everything is going to be better than the original Switch. We are looking specifically at the Switch 2. I would also like to mention that this video is coming out before the Switch 2 has even dropped. It's like mid-April as of me recording this video. So we are strictly going off of reported numbers in the official Nintendo website. We're going off of what critics have said, and as well as like YouTubers and other TikTokers have said during these like Nintendo Switch 2 hands-on events and some of their personal experience, more of when it comes to how some games perform on the Switch. I'd also like to mention, I will be mentioning prices. All of this is pre-tariff as of, what is today? As of April 13th, Sunday, all tariffs have been postponed with the exception of China. And there is also been stated that smartphones and computers are going to be exempt. The only thing is, if the Tetris movie has taught me anything, is that consoles and computers, I think, are supposed to be classified as a separate thing. Like, a computer needs a physical keyboard and mouse to work, and I know it's like, oh, the Switch 2 and the fucking Lenovo Legion, those ones have a mouse. Doesn't have a physical keyboard, and I think that's going to be a classification. So I have not read through any of these in depth to actually know if video game consoles will be included. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Right now I'm thinking that they won't be, but 5% sliver, they're probably still going to be affected. We don't know right now. So I'm going to be going across every console here for each category, like price, we'll go through all of them. What you get, go through all of them. I'm not going to exactly be doing like which one wins. There are obviously ones that are going to lose. There are some objective worse ones on here, but a good amount of these, especially when it comes to price and games, I think are a little more subjective. So while I will be giving my opinion in what I think might be better, I'm not going to be like, yes, this is obviously better. And whenever I do say that something is like objectively better, it is going to be within a vacuum of that thing. So like when we get to screen size, I'm going to say, regardless of everything else, this is the best screen size. So regardless of everything else, this is the best controller. This is the best, size. Just for context. Also, we are excluding any handheld console before like 2020-ish. Obviously, like the retro Nintendo ones, your Game Boys, DS, 3DS. The PSP and the Vita are obviously not going to be in here. The Neo Geo Pocket, all of those ones that are like old, obviously they're not going to be in here for consideration. So let's get started here. The PlayStation Portal. Did you really think I was actually going to talk about the PlayStation Portal here? Get the fuck out of here, you retard. So what are all of the consoles we will actually be looking at today? I am going to be looking at a lot of the most recent PC handhelds as well as the Nintendo Switch 2. Going down the line. So Nintendo Switch 2. We are going to be looking at the Steam Deck LCD. We're going to be looking at the Steam Deck OLED, the 512GB, as well as the 1TB version. We are going to be looking at the Asus ROG Ally Z1, as well as the Z1 Extreme. We're going to be looking at the Asus ROG Ally X, the 2024 version. The Lenovo Legion Go, the 512GB? Yep, 512GB version, as well as the 1TB version. And then we are going to be looking at the MSI Claw A1M021SG, as well as the MSI Claw A1M020SG. The only one I've interacted out of this is sort of the Nintendo Switch 2 because I've interacted with the Switch before. Otherwise, I have never touched, I've never seen in person any of these other ones. I'm going off of what I've seen online in terms of specs and numbers. Starting off with the prices here, the Nintendo Switch 2, pre-tariffs again, you're going to be able to pick this up for $449.99, or you can get the bundled version with Mario Kart World for $499.99. The Steam Deck LCD screen, you're going to be able to pick that up for $399.99. The Steam Deck OLED, the 512GB version, will be $549.99, with the 1TB version being another $100 more expensive at $649.99. The ROG Ally Z1 will be $499.99, with the Asus ROG Ally Z1 Extreme coming in at $649.99. The ROG Ally X is going to be $799.99. Looking at the Lenovo Legion Go, the 512GB version will be $699.99, with the Lenovo Legion Go 1TB version being $749.99. Now with the MSI Claw, it's a little weird. Just because of how it looks on the website. The 021 SG is going to be $899, although it looks like it's being marked down from $1,096 according to the website. And the 020 SG is going to be $1,099, marked down from what looks like $1,239. Now those are a lot of prices, and I think you can, again, looking at it in a vacuum, you can easily say the MSI Claw is the worst out of these. I'm gonna be honest, even like my opinion, looking at all the stuff later, the MSI Claw, regardless of which one you get, for the price, not worth it. Not worth it. Like, the only reason I could see why you would want to get the MSI Claw is if you just like MSI that much. Otherwise, I would not go with the MSI Claw at all. The editing fuck, actually the angry editing fuck over here, because like there is genuinely no reason you should be getting an MSI Claw. No, I don't care which version, no fucking reason, no reason. It is one, the most expensive on this list, and I'm going back through, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, but there is no section where it is actually the best. It is at the very best average in every single category. And sure, while not one console is like the best in every category, I can tell you right now, for the price, if you get an MSI Claw, you're just a real fucking idiot. I don't care if it's because you like MSI or because your parents got it for your Christmas, because then your parents are just fucking idiots, because you are paying almost $1,000 out the ass where you're just getting the same performance as something you could have gotten for $550 or $600. You could have saved almost half of your money if you just were a smarter person and not a very unintellectual human being. Especially when looking at what you actually get when you buy this stuff. When you buy the Nintendo Switch 2, either the bundle or the base version, you are going to be getting the Nintendo Switch 2, your two Joy-Con 2s, your Joy-Con 2 wrist straps, and the dock itself. And of course, if you get the bundle, you will also get Mario Kart World. Looking at all three of the Steam Decks, if you buy any of them, you're going to be getting that Steam Deck, the carrying case, as well as a Steam Profile bundle. And if you do get the OLED 1TB version, you will also get an exclusive startup movie and keyboard theme. Now, what if you get any of the ROG Allies? Any of the three ROG Allies, you will obviously get that ROG Ally, whether it's the Z1, the Z1 Extreme, or the X, and you will also get an automatic 90 days of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. Looking at both of the Lenovo Legion Go's, both of the sizes, you will obviously get the console itself, you will get the True Strike controllers, as well as a carrying case, And it said 3 months of Game Pass, Xbox Game Pass. I'm assuming that's going to be similar to the ROG Ally, where it's 90 days of Game Pass Ultimate. That's what I'm assuming. And then the MSI Claw, both versions, you get the MSI Claw. Again, why would you want an MSI Claw? And then, of course, with all of these, you get any cables for charging, of course. Now, we're going really in depth with this. We're looking at the size of the device, the overall dimensions of it. And I'm gonna say this here: Switch easily beats everything else out. That's honestly like an objective true. Now with device size, everything here is going to be in inches, and we are going to be going in width, height, and depth. Looking at the Nintendo Switch 2, it is going to be 10.7 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall by 0.55 inches thick. Yeah, thick. And that is included with the Joy-Con 2s on the console. All three of the Steam Decks are the exact same size, with 11.73 inches wide, 4.61 inches high, and 1.93 inches thick. Looking at the ROG Allies, all of them are around the same size, especially in terms of width and height. The width of all of them is going to be 11.02 inches, while the height is 4.37 inches. The depth is where it gets a little weird, at least according to their official website. The Z1 and the Z1 Extreme are said to be anywhere between 0.83 to 1.28 inches in thickness, while the ROG Ally X is said to be anywhere from 0.97 to 1.45 inches thick. I don't know why there's a range there, but that is what it said on the website. Little confusing to me. Next up, objectively the worst, it's like sized out of all of these, the Lenovo Legion Go. Both of these consoles are going to be the same size at 11.76 inches in width, 5.16 inches in height, and 1.6 inches in depth or thickness, and that is with the True Strike controllers on them. Finally, the MSI Claw, maybe one reason you actually get this thing if you just don't want a big Lenovo Legion. The device's size is going to be 11.58 inches in width, 4.61 inches in height, and 0.83 inches in thickness, and that is for both consoles. Next up, let's look at weight, and like who wins and loses here is pretty much the same. Switch 2 is the lightest on here at 535 grams or 1.18 pounds. The LCD Steam Deck is 669 grams, while the OLED versions are actually 640, a little bit lighter. Nice. Both the ROG Ally Z1 and Z1 Extreme are looking to be at about 608 grams, while the ROG Ally X is looking to be at 678 grams. Both of the Lenovo Legion Go's are going to be at 854 grams, the heaviest on here at 1.88 pounds, a whole 0.7 pounds heavier than the Switch. And then both the MSI Claws are going to be 675 grams. And again, for the Switch and Lenovo Legions, that is with the controllers on them. Next up, let's look at the screen size. This is in inches, and this is the diagonal of the screen. So this is going to be 7.9 inches for the Nintendo Switch 2, actually the second best on this list. For the Steam Deck LCD, it is 7 inches diagonal, while the OLED versions are both 7.4. For all of the ROG Allies, they are going to be 7 inches in diagonal. The Lenovo Legion Go is actually 8.8 inches, which, I mean, obviously it is a bit of a bigger console, so bigger screen, that would make a little bit more sense. And the claws are both 7 inches for the screen. So obviously here, the Lenovo Legion takes it. You know, it does come with that cost of, it is going to be a bit of a bigger console. It's a little less portable. Like, it's still portable, obviously. It's still a handheld, but little more inconvenient to carry around. Like it was very funny with the Switch. You could literally take the controllers off. You could slide that in your pocket, like at least for men. Slide it in your pocket. It would be nice and easy. You could throw it in your backpack, nice and easy. And you could do that with relatively a lot of these other ones. But the Lenovo Legion, again, I haven't seen it in person. I feel like that would be a little bit more inconvenient to move around with, especially when you're comparing it to the rest of these handhelds. Next up, going into storage, where the Switch will actually be one of the worst ones on here, actually the second to last in terms of how good it is. The Switch 2 is looking to have 256 gigabytes of internal storage. We're going to be going off that first. The Steam Deck LCD has 256 gigabytes, while the OLEDs have the 512 gigabytes and the 1 terabyte version. The ROG Ally Z1 as well as the Z1 Extreme is going to be having 512 gigabytes of internal storage on an M.2. And I'll explain why that matters in a little bit. The ROG Ally X is going to be a 1 terabyte, also on an M.2. The Lenovo Legion Go is also going to be having the 512 gigabyte and the 1 terabyte versions, also on M.2s. And the MSI Claw is also going to have the exact same thing, 512 gigabytes and the 1 terabyte version, both on an M.2. Now, why am I mentioning M.2s here? Why does that matter? Well, that matters a lot with expanding your storage. An M.2 in these consoles actually allows you to upgrade the internal storage similar to how you would in a computer. So for all of those, all of the ROG Allies, the Legion Goes, and the MSI Claws, all of those versions that I mentioned, all of those you are going to be able to replace the internal storage with a new M.2 of a larger size. I believe up to 2 terabytes. My research might be off there, but I believe up to 2 terabytes. And that's before you actually put in a micro SD card. With the exception of the Nintendo Switch 2 and both of the versions of the MSI Claw, everything here will allow you to put in a micro SD card for some expanded storage. That's all 3 of your Steam Decks, all 3 of your ROG Allies, as well as both of your Legion Goes. Now, the MSI Claw does not allow for micro SD, according to my research. They only allow for the M.2, so that kind of sucks, especially when you're paying so much already. That kind of sucks. And the Nintendo Switch 2 technically cannot do micro SD cards. They can only do micro SD Express, which, depending on how you look at it, could be a little bit better. The editing fuck after hours. So, actually, with the exception of the Steam Deck, everything else can actually use micro SD cards, and they can use micro SD Express. The only reason the Steam Deck cannot use micro SD Express is because it is strictly built for one specific kind of micro SD card type. If they use Express in it, you won't get the same benefits that you're expecting to get with the micro SD, the faster file transfer speeds, all of that. But everything else can use micro SD Express. Dumb fuck idiot here, you can leave him alone. Also, the MSI Claw can do micro SD. Big dumb fuck idiot here. Alright, getting off of that, I rambled for a little. Next up is handheld resolution. We're not looking at docked, we are looking at strictly handheld for this section. Looking at the Nintendo Switch 2, that is going to be 1080p up to 120 frames. Looking at the Steam Decks, we're going to be able to do 800p at 60 frames per second for the LCD version, and 800p 90 frames per second in the OLED versions. For all of your ROG Allies, you are going to be able to do 1080p 120 gaming. Something that I actually wasn't expecting when I was looking at this, but as I was going through and seeing the screen size, it makes a bit of sense. The Legion Goes are actually able to do 1600p at 144 frames, and for anybody that doesn't know, that's actually over 2K. 2K gaming is 1440p, so this can actually do over 2K gaming in 144 frames. That's actually pretty neat, and that's just in a handheld. And finally, with the MSI Claws here, it looks like you're going to be able to do 1080p 120 frames in handheld. Better fucking be for $1,000. So looking at this, very obviously you can tell the Lenovo Legion is the best out of all of these for resolution. That's just objective. That's obvious. The worst on here is the Steam Deck. Not only are they only able to get up to 60 and 90, it's also at 800p. That's very close to 720p, which is what the first Switch was doing. So E. Next up, I wanted to just throw this in here, HDR support. The only ones on here that can actually do HDR, especially while in handheld, are the Nintendo Switch 2, as well as both of the Steam Deck OLEDs. They're the only ones that market HDR support, as far as I could tell. None of the other ones are able to do that in handheld mode. I don't know about docked mode, obviously, but maybe. But since we're talking about docked, let's actually go over to that. And first, let's look at the docked prices. Let's look at how much does it cost to actually dock your system. Looking at the Nintendo Switch 2, technically $0, because if you buy a Nintendo Switch 2, it is coming with the dock. So technically, you are not paying anything outside of the regular price. But let's assume you do get this second hand and you don't get the dock, or your dock breaks. It will cost $109.99. And the only thing I can really say to that is, that's fucking crazy, but don't break your fucking dock. And if you're really going to be buying secondhand, make sure it comes with a fucking dock. Like, I don't think that's too crazy of a statement. Just make sure it comes with a fucking dock and don't break it. It's not that hard to not break one of those docks. Looking at the rest, the dock does not come with any of them. You will have to buy it separately. So everything for docked, while it is as good or better than the Switch 2, you do have to think about that's an extra purchase on top of the already $400, $500, $600 console, $800 in some cases. The Steam Deck, both the LCD and the OLED, it's its own dock, is going to be $79 for the official dock. The Lenovo Legion Go is going to be $64.99 for both, obviously, as well as the ROG Ally. And from all I could see, while there is technically a dock for the MSI Claw, it doesn't actually let you display anything. It is strictly for charging. I also couldn't actually order it. Like, obviously I wasn't going to order it, but you couldn't even see the price from the website. So I don't know if that was a me problem. And obviously all of these can have their third-party docks for like a third of the price. But that's a third-party dock, and if I remember anything from the Switch 2, not the Switch 2, the original Switch, was that these third-party docks would brick systems, they would break, they would overload it, and they would just fuck with the whole thing. And something else that I like with the Switch 2 and the Switch 1 dock that I'm not a big fan of with the other ones is that the other docks are more like putting your thing in a little stand instead of the Switch and Switch 2, where it's a little bit more secure. Like, if you throw it in that dock, as long as you're not trying to like actively knock it over, that's not falling out of that thing. But when it comes to like the Steam Deck, the Lenovo Legion, the Ally, I'm just a little concerned that sometimes it might fall out, or like even a slight knock could just knock the whole thing out. Again, never seen that in person, but just a little thing that I'm worried about when looking at it. It's just a little too small for my liking. I like that the Switch ones are a little bit more secure, but that's a subjective thing. Now looking at the docked resolution for all of these. Across the board, all of these that are able to be docked are able to do 4K 60 reportedly. 4K 60, easy. It is able to get up to that. Obviously not every single game is running at 4K 60 frames per second, but it is advertised to be able to go up to that much. Also, with the exception of the Ally, it looks like everything is going to also be able to do 1440p at 120 frames. I would assume that the Ally can also do that. It just didn't say that on their website from what I could see. And with the Lenovo Legion, I would also assume that it is able to do 1440p at 144 frames. I mean, if the handheld can do 144 frames, I don't see why docked mode wouldn't be able to do that. I think the website, 1440p 120, that's just something you see standard across a lot of stuff now, so it feels a little bit more right than saying, 1600 144. But I would assume it is able to do 1440p 144. Just looking at some other things with the dock, obviously the Nintendo Switch 2 as well as all of these Steam Decks can do HDR. They all have HDR support. But one more thing with the Switch 2 is that it has a fan for cooling. Another reason why I personally think I like the Nintendo Switch 2 dock a little more is that it has a fan in there to assist with cooling. So the Switch will actually be able to overclock itself, at least from what reports are saying. You're going to be able to actually run it a little bit better. It's not going to get up there in temps. I remember whenever I go through and I play it in docked, sometimes I'll touch it and it's a little steamy, especially after I've been playing Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom for a little bit. It gets a little steamy sometimes. So having a fan in there, very lovely, very lovely. Next up, we're going to be looking at the CPU and the GPU, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm just going to tell you the specs that I found. I'm a computer science major, but I got no fucking clue what half of this means. We didn't learn this in my computer science class. So I'll go down the list and I'll tell you. The Nintendo Switch 2 we've obviously heard reports on some stuff, but we haven't gotten anything definitive yet, so I'm not exactly going to be reporting on that. We do know the GPU is going to be a custom-made NVIDIA GPU, and that's about all we know for sure. Looking at all three of the Steam Decks, we're going to go CPU first. Looking at the CPUs in all three of the Steam Decks, they are looking at Zen 2 chips, 4 cores, 8 teraflops, I think, with 2.4 to 3.5 gigahertz. For the ROG Ally Z1 is obviously using the AMD Ryzen Z1, while the Z1 Extreme is obviously using the Z1 Extreme. The ROG Ally X is also using the Z1 Extreme, same with both of the Lenovo Legions. Those are also going to be using the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme. And then the only different one is the MSI Claw, which is using the Intel Core Ultra 5 processor, with the 512GB version using the 135H version, and the 1TB using the 155H version. Editing fuck. I had to redo this whole GPU part because I was really being a fucking idiot during the recording of it, so I'm just going to redo it here. We do not know the Nintendo Switch 2 GPU. That is going to be custom made by NVIDIA, but that's all we know currently. Looking at the Steam Decks, it is going to be an RDNA chip. I believe it's an RDNA 2 with 2 complete units and a 1.0 to 1.6 gigahertz and up to 1.6 teraflops. For the actual OLEDs, it is a set 1.6 gigahertz, but for the LCD, it is that range of 1 to 1.6 gigahertz. For the Ally Z1, we are going to be using AMD Radeon with 4 complete units and up to 2.5 gigahertz, and that is able to get up to 2.8 teraflops. And the Z1 Extreme as well as the ROG Ally X are going to be the same, with again using AMD Radeon graphics, but with 12 complete units, up to 2.7 gigahertz and up to 8.6 teraflops. Very nice. Now looking over at the Lenovo Legion Go's, those are going to be the exact same stats as the ROG Ally Z1 processor. AMD Radeon graphics with 4 complete units, up to 2.5 gigahertz and 2.8 teraflops. And then looking at the MSI Claws, they use something called Intel Arc. They didn't give any other specifications on the website past that, but it is just called the Intel Arc graphics. Alright, fuck off, go back to the video. Looking at RAM for all of the consoles, again, the Switch 2 does not actually have a set what RAM we are getting. Even on the spec sheet, I couldn't find out how much RAM we were having, but it is rumored that we will be at 12 gigabytes of RAM. And I'll explain after I say everything why I think that's okay. The only other console here that is using 12 gigabytes of RAM is actually, surprisingly, the ROG Ally X. And it is using 12 gigabytes of DDR5, while everything else is going to be at 16 gigabytes of DDR5. Now, the only reason I am okay with the Switch 2 only having 12 gigabytes is because you got to think all the other ones are running Windows, or with the Steam Deck's case, a Linux system. They have to run a whole separate operating system on top of what they have on there as well. They are, handheld computers. So in my eyes, that extra 4 gigabytes makes a little bit more sense, so you can use that to actually run, the OS. Because some of these come with Windows 11. Some of these, I think, come with Windows 10. I think 1 or 2 of them do. But most of them come with Windows 11. And that's going to need a few gigabytes just to run that itself. So that extra 4 gigabytes makes sense. I think the Switch 2 will be just fine with 12 gigabytes. Would 16 be better? Of course, but I think that would have been a price jump, or that would have been having to make the system a little bit bigger. So I think 12 is going to be perfectly fine, if that is the confirmed amount of gigabytes. Again, that is just rumored. Looking at Wi-Fi here, pretty much everything is the same. I'll list the outliers here, where the Steam Deck LCD is going to be running at Wi-Fi 5, while the MSI Claws are going to be running at Intel Killer Wi-Fi 7. I don't know if Intel Killer Wi-Fi 7 is the next step up. Right now I only know of Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E, which is what everything else is running on. The Switch 2, all the ROG Allies, all of the Lenovo's, as well as the Steam Deck OLEDs are all running at Wi-Fi 6. Looking at battery life, now this one was a little bit more difficult to go with, because outside of the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck, none of the other guys actually mention what their battery life range is. They just say, we got a good battery life, which according to what I found out and to user accounts, that is not the case. So let's look at reported numbers. The Switch 2 is reportedly going to be having 2 to 6.5 hours of gameplay. That is according to their spec sheet that they have on their official website. The Steam Deck LCD is going to be having 2 to 8 hours, while the OLEDs are having 3 to 12 hours of gameplay. For the rest of these, I did use ChatGPT. I'm going to say that now. I used ChatGPT, I used the deep learning so that it could pull from a bunch of different articles, a bunch of different websites, to try and see what the range kind of looks like for these consoles here. So take these with a grain of salt. These are not confirmed, these are not official, but these are kind of what you can expect when looking at these. Both the ROG Ally Z1 as well as the Z1 Extreme, they have 40 watt processors, or sorry, 40 watt batteries. So they are going to be able to run from about 2 to 8 hours of battery life, the same as the original Steam Deck. Looking at the ROG Ally X, it is actually an 80 watt battery, double that. So I kind of took that into account. You're going to be able to run about 4 to 14 hours when looking at the ROG Ally X. Looking at the actual worst battery life here is the Lenovo Legion Go's that only allow for up to 1 to 5 hours of gameplay. That's like the actual worst on here. And then again, looking at the MSI Claw, you have 2 to 6 hours, which is the second worst on here. Now again, the ROG Allies, the Lenovo, the MSI, those battery lives are not official. There is not anything on the website saying that. I found those through ChatGPT, which pulled stuff from a bunch of different websites. Also, do remember that just because some of these are 1 to 5 hours or 4 to 14, that does not mean you're getting 14 hours. It all depends on how long you actually play the thing at once and also what games you're playing. Like if we're looking at the Switch 2, if you're running something like some of the Nintendo classics, like let's say you're playing Super Mario through the Game Boy player on there, you're not going to be taking up a lot of battery life. That does not require a lot of processing power. But then let's say you move over to something like Cyberpunk. That's going to be very intensive. That's where you're probably going to be getting closer to that 2, maybe 3 hours of actual battery life if you're strictly playing in handheld. I am skipping over the controller section because it doesn't really matter anymore, but I'm leaving this in here because it needs to be said. And then looking at the MSI Claw, the only one to have Hall effect joysticks, by the way, for everybody complaining about the Switch 2 not having a Hall effect, the MSI is the only one on here that doesn't have Hall effect. And guess what? The DualSense, the Xbox Series X, almost no PlayStation or Xbox controller has had Hall effect. Shut the fuck up. Guess which one has Hall effect? Guess the only one of these that has Hall effect. The one that's $1,000 fucking dollars. Shut the fuck up. I'm sorry, I needed to say that. Okay, kind of tying it up here with all of these is the game libraries and the game prices and sales. And this is where you really see the separation of Nintendo Switch 2 from these other consoles, and why, as an actual handheld, yes, they are in competition, but as a gaming handheld, Like specs-wise, these are absolutely in competition with each other, but because of the games, it's really hard to be like, oh yeah, I would rather this than this, because they both serve different purposes here. The Switch 2 obviously is the only one that can legally play any first-party Nintendo games. It's the only one you can play now $80 games. At least with Mario Kart World, we'll get into that later. But a nice thing with Switch 2 is that a lot of third parties are actually coming back onto the Switch. We're getting sports titles. We're getting Duskbloods. Yay! We're getting a lot of third party coming back, and that even opens up the possibility to shooters coming on with COD. I don't believe Overwatch is on there or Marvel Rivals. I think that there is an absolute possibility that we could see it on here. I know, especially with Marvel Rivals, that's a little hard to comprehend because it can't run on a PS4, but you know, this is better than a PS4. It's not good as PS5. Marvel Rivals, that's definitely a maybe, not definitely. But CODs, those are obviously going to be possible on here. But then you look at any of these PC handhelds and then you get everything that you can get on a PC pretty much. Almost every PC game will be usable on a Steam Deck, a ROG Ally, Lenovo Legion, MSI Claw. Obviously, there are some that are going to be a little harder to work with, especially with indie titles that don't get that Steam Deck support, or any of these supports. But for the like general what everybody's playing, you'll be able to play them on these things. And especially when you look at something like the Lenovo Legions and the ROG Allies, if you do buy them, you also get an extra 90 days of Xbox Game Pass, opening up that, whole other library right there. And you're not even locked to something like Steam. Like with the Steam Deck, you are technically not locked to only using the Steam Deck. You can, since it is a Linux system, install, the Epic Games launcher and any other launcher that you want, as long as it works with Linux, of course, and use them on there. Any of these other ones are running Windows, so you can very easily install Epic Games launcher, Minecraft, whatever you want onto the system. Yeah! And of course, it has to be said with game prices, Nintendo prices are absolutely atrocious, especially looking at the launch titles for the Switch 2, the launch titles and the upgrade packs. 40 minutes in, I fixed the hair, okay? Fuck off. But obviously games are going to be more expensive on the Switch when looking at first party. Third party is a different story, but first party is obviously going to be up there. And while, yes, there are sales, not frequent enough and honestly not worth it enough. You get maybe 20% off, it goes down to $40. I'm sorry, I don't know about that. That's not a good enough deal for me right now, especially when I can go over to Steam and get like 10 games for the exact same $40 price. So obviously when it comes to the actual games and the prices and the amount you can play, the PC handhelds take that cake, no questions asked. And one more thing I want to add on here, just as a quick little cool thing. All the ROG Allies have fingerprint sensors. That's actually interesting. I don't know where it is on there, but according to their website, they have fingerprint sensors, which I just thought was really cool. I wanted to throw that in. So, welcome to the end. Welcome to the end. You absolute fucking fool. You really thought we were done here. You really thought we weren't going to go into a bonus round. I mean, everybody's been talking about how this thing relates to a PS4. You think we weren't going to talk about this shit? No. Let's do this. Let's do this shit now. We're going up against PS5, the Slim, the Pro, the Xbox Series X, both versions, as well as the Series S, both versions. Let's fucking do this shit. No, because you wanted to do this shit, right? Okay, I came on a little strong, but you get what I'm saying. So let's go ahead. Let me show you all of the details for all of these other home consoles that are currently selling as well. Obviously, the Switch is going to be a little bit less powerful in these cases, or at least matching it, but I thought it would be nice to put the numbers into perspective. Let's see how it's comparing numbers-wise. I'm not going to say the Nintendo Switch 2 numbers again. You've already heard them. I'll just throw them down below in the template. But the PS5, the original one, the original one, no Slim, no Pro. The digital version you can currently buy for about $349.99. It did get marked down from $399. The physical edition of it is currently selling at $399.99, marked down from $499.99. The PS5 Slim, the digital version is $449.99, while the physical version is $499.99. And the PS5 Pro is $699.99 total, but if you want, you can also throw on a disc drive for $79.99, essentially making it, what is that, $779.98. The Xbox Series X, the 1TB versions, the digital version of that 1TB version is going to be $449.99, while the physical is going to be $499.99. The Series X 2TB version is going to be $599.99, while the Series S 512GB version is going to be $299.99, while the Series S 1TB version is going to be $349.99. Prices all laid out. The Switch is about on par with a current PS5 Slim and Xbox Series X 1TB in terms of pricing. Now, what are you going to be getting with this? For the original PS5, even if you get it refurbished, you will be getting a PS5, obviously, the DualSense controller, the console stand, as well as Astro's Playroom. And if you get the PS5 Slim or the Pro version, you will be getting that PS5, the DualSense controller, the acrylic stand so you can put it on its side, as well as Astro's Playroom pre-installed. If you want to be getting any of the Xbox consoles, you will be getting the system that you get, as well as an Xbox controller. And if you do get to the Series X, the 2TB version, that will come with the Galaxy Black console and controller variants of it. It's basically just white flecks on it looking like stars. Looking at storage, a lot of this is going to look the same, but the original PS5 came with 825 gigabytes of storage. The PS5 Slim came with 1 terabyte, the PS5 Pro 2 terabytes, the Xbox Series X, both the physical and digital versions have a 1 terabyte version, and then there is a physical version of 2 terabytes. With the Series S, you also have a 512 gigabyte version and a 1 terabyte version. And you are able to expand the storage on all of these on all of your PS5 consoles. You are able to throw in an M.2. It does need to be kind of specific. You can't just throw in any M.2. Mainly there are the PS5 ones, and then I believe it's called a WD Black. Those are the ones that either work the best or the only ones that work. Don't know exactly, so apologies. And for the Xbox consoles, you are going to be able to do an external HDD or an external hard drive that you can chuck into one of the USB ports, or they do sell storage expansion cards through Seagate, at least officially, at 3 different sizes. Ooh, get ready for this. It's going to be 512 gigabytes at $89.99, 1 terabyte for $149.99, and 2 terabytes for $279.99. Correct me if I'm wrong, that feels pretty expensive. Every console supports HDR here. All of them do support HDR. Looking at the resolution of all of these, obviously there's no handheld resolution for a home fucking console, but looking at what all the consoles can do. The original PS5 and the PS5 Slim are able to do 4K 120, 2K 120, and 1080p 120. No matter how much that box says 8K, they quite physically cannot do 8K. It doesn't even have a setting in there that allows you to try and set it to 8K. It's quite literally not possible for those. But if you would like 8K 60, you can go to the PS5 Pro, which using the PSSR, or, AI upscaling, they can get it to 8K 60, at least advertising that they can. And in the same vein with the Series X, for all of the versions of the Series X, they also offer 8K 60. Don't mention any AI upscaling, but I assume there has to be some for that. Not sure if it can, and honestly, I'm fairly sure that it cannot. But they can also do 4K 120, 2K 120, and 1080p 120. But if you want to go for the Series S, that is able to do 2K at 120 and 1080p at 120. Unfortunately, no 4K for them. Looking at the CPU and then the GPU, again, don't know everything off the top of my head. Big dumb fuck here. So I'm just going to list off numbers. For the PS5 original and the Slim, you are looking at an AMD Zen 2 chip with 8 cores, 16 threads, running at 3.5 gigahertz, and then the PS5 Pro is the same thing, just running at 3.85 gigahertz. Looking at the Series X for the CPU, it is also running on a Zen 2, 8 cores, 16 threads, but able to go up to reportedly 3.8 gigahertz. And looking at it, that is the same for the Series S as well. I'm gonna be honest, that seems a little doubtful, but I think that's where the GPU kind of sees the offset here. Looking at the CPU now, going into the PS5 original and the Slim, we are looking at the AMD RDNA2 with 36, I learned this, complete units. Don't know what the fuck it means, but CU means complete units. Able to run at 2.23 gigahertz and 10.28 teraflops. Looking over at the PS5 Pro, it is on that RDNA 2, able to have 60 complete units. I couldn't find anything about how the gigahertz, but it is able to run at 16.7 teraflops. Ooh, big number, jingly keys, jingly keys. Looking at the Series X, they both have another RDNA 2, only with 52 complete units, or whatever units, running at 1.825 gigahertz, but only 12 teraflops. Powerful system. You come here for the power, don't you? Also, Xbox Series S is running on another RDNA 2 with only 20 complete units, 1.565 gigahertz, and 4 teraflops. You come here for the power, don't you? Looking at RAM on all of these, everything runs at 16 gigabytes DDR6, but the PS5 Pro does also have 2 gigabytes of DDR5 just for the OS, just so it can run that, and then the games can take up the rest of the 16 gigabytes. Battery life, yeah, funny. And then the game library and prices/sales. Obviously, looking at the PlayStation lineup, you have all first-party PlayStation, you have a PSN, and also backwards compatible with most PS4 games, as well as being able to play PSVR and PSVR 2 games, and, you know, hook that up to it as well. With Xbox, you are able to play all first-party Xbox games. You have Game Pass. You have backwards compatibility with most Xbox One games, some Xbox 360 games, and Xbox games. The Series S, unfortunately, does not have original, like, Xbox compatibility, at least in the form of discs, as well as the digital version of the Series X. Obviously, they can't take discs, so the only Xbox original games you can get are through Game Pass or buying it online. But I was looking at discs for the backwards compatibility. Also, I forgot to mention this before with Nintendo in their game library, but you do also have the Nintendo Classics Collection, allowing you to play a lot of old retro games of Game Boy Advanced and GameCube and before, you know, all that jazz. And they are also backwards compatible with almost all original Nintendo Switch games. Whew, speed round over, done with. Obviously, the Nintendo Switch 2 is not as powerful as these consoles. I honestly, looking at this, I don't even think it's as powerful as a Series S. Actually, it looks a little bit more powerful than a Series S. Yes, my apologies. It is actually just a little bit more powerful than a Series S. Obviously not looking at the CPU and GPU because we don't know that yet for sure, but looking at everything else, and including the 12 gigabytes of rumored RAM, the Switch 2 is running on par with and possibly better than an Xbox Series S. That's kind of what we're working with right now. And another thing you have to think about, that's a Series S in handheld form. Like we're all talking about PS4, PS4 Pro. No, this is a Series S in handheld. That's wild. I need to make a TikTok. Now, is the Nintendo Switch 2 a better handheld console? No. If you want to take the game prices and the game library out of the equation, then I would say it's average. It's not the worst. It's not the best. They all excel and are terrible in different fields. Like the Lenovo Legion has a better screen, obviously, but the Switch is lighter because it doesn't have a better screen. You know, the Steam Deck is able to do all of this with Steam. Battery life, storage, yada yada. Like, obviously there are pros and cons to all of these where I can't really definitively say this is better than this. Again, taking games out of the equation. But is the Switch 2 better than some of these? I think if you're only looking at just playing like maybe one game, because like we've been hearing a lot about Cyberpunk 2077, where it is running better on the Switch 2 than on the Steam Deck in handheld and possibly in docked mode. So at least in that case, Switch 2 is a little bit better. Now, does Cyberpunk run better on the Lenovo Legion? I don't know. I haven't seen anybody talk about that. I would honestly say the battery life on that is when you're trying to run Cyberpunk 2077, again, would tank that. No matter how good it's running, you're only going to be able to play it for 1, maybe 2 hours compared to these other consoles. But again, that's where the pros and cons come in. Especially when you look at Switch 2, I think right now, off the bat, it's not going to be as good, especially when you look at the game library. But give it 2 or 3 years. We're going to be getting more first party. We're going to be getting more third party coming to the console. We'll get more ports coming over. So I think right now, at least in terms of the game library, it is not up to snuff with PC. But I think as time goes on, give it 2 or 3 years, I think you could maybe make an argument for the Switch 2 might be a good main console to use over a PC handheld. Especially if something like COD or some of these hero shooters come over, that I would think that would actually be a bit of a pull for some people. Now again, there is a place for all of these. I said this earlier in the video, I'm saying it again. There is a place for all of these. And hell, you can get a Nintendo Switch 2 and one of these PC handhelds. I would honestly say that's probably the best here. You don't need one of every PC handheld, obviously. Like, especially if you're just playing it for the games, you only need one of them. But like, you have one of each. You have a Switch 2 and a PC handheld. You can play all of your Nintendo Switch games as well as all those PC games right there. Like, that's kind of how I have it. I have a Switch over there. I'm going to be getting a Switch 2. I'm really only using it for first-party titles. Everything else is going to be PlayStation or maybe PC. Xbox is literally like also for first-party games. So there's a place for getting both of them if you have the money to obviously get them. And if you want my personal opinion, I would say out of any of the PC handhelds, I would probably go with the ROG Ally Z1. That one's pulling me in right now. Just for all of the things, it's not exactly the best in any case. It's not the worst. It's very average, but it's average in every area. It's not like the Lenovo Legion that has a shit battery life. And it's not like, you know, the Steam Deck that's going to be like a fucking brick in your pocket or something. Like the Z1 Extreme, for the price, that would probably be the PC handheld I would go with if I had to choose one out of the lineup. Now here's another question. Can any of these emulate the Nintendo Switch 2? More than likely, probably not. More than likely, probably not. I'm going to be going into a whole nother video on why this is the case. How does emulation work? How do people build an emulator? How does all of this work? I'm going to make that into another video, probably the one for either later or this week or next week. But I can tell you right now, the Switch 2 is probably not going to be emulated on any of these PC handhelds. On a PC, you could probably do that. That is very likely. On a handheld, no. And let me not be a Switch 2 glazer or anything. We're not going to sugarcoat this. The Nintendo Switch 2 has a lot to live up to. I mean, especially when you are comparing it to these other PC handhelds, you got to make sure that that performance is going to be up to snuff. While the battery life is a little bit less than average, you got to make sure you're able to get the most out of that. Storage is already on the downside, so you really got to make sure that they're able to, you know, compact those games enough so that they can actually fit everything onto the system, which Nintendo was very good at. And looking at some of these early prices with Mario Kart World being only like 23 gigabytes and Donkey Kong being 10, I think they'll be fine with that as well. But they also need to like fix the online connection. They need to fix some of the game performance and all of that. They need to fix the eShop, and of course, they need to they can't be having the game prices too high. At the very least, they need to really look into like dropping the price after a little bit of time. Give it a year, I would say. Those prices need to drop $10, $20. That needs to be something that Nintendo does. Will they do it? Dude, they're making the Welcome Tour for $10. Do we really think they're going to be doing that anytime soon? But that's all the information I can give you. That's all the information I was able to find. If there is more, please, please, please tell me in the comments. If there is anything that I did get wrong or didn't fully explain that you might be able to explain better, by all means, put it in the comments. I would love people to stay more informed on this. So if you want more, check out the comments, see if anybody says anything. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I hope you guys are going to be with me picking up a Switch 2, because regardless of controversy, regardless of prices, I want to Switch 2. I'm going to be getting that shit. So I hope to see you all there the same day. Please come check me out on stream this week. We are going to be playing First Berserker Kazan. I said I was going to beat it by last week. That obviously didn't fucking happen. I'm not going to make that same promise here, but we are hopefully being able to beat that before next Thursday when Clair Obscur comes out, Expedition 33, and then we are going to be playing that. So please come check me out on stream, either on Twitch or on TikTok, and you can check me out there. Go check out the VOD channel as well. Just subscribe, follow me everywhere to stay updated. Thank you guys so much. Have a good one. Peace out, everybody. I love you.
Getting tough from hoes right on my side, and I'm getting all the bottoms. Love to see them while they ride. Got me supercharged, sparking up like got me full of venom. Then I spark it up, the smoke just make them pull off all they denim. Show the money spread, make it go and drop a good persona. Put the gun up to her head, that bitch ain't got no persona. Then we blasting off, rocking off to the skies like Jay. Get the RPG, we go.